Okay, hello and welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Network webinar today with Michael Bremer. So today Michael will be talking on the topic of be the leader you want to be. Just a few words about us. So the Enterprise Excellence Network are a members arena for senior lean leaders founded by Professor Peter Hines, and focuses on best practices from award-winning host sites, with the themes of the workshops changing depending on the members' needs. But if you would like to find out more, you'll have my email address in the follow-up email, and you can also visit our website, which is enterpriseexcellencenetwork.com. So for today's session, there'll be approximately 30 minutes presentation by Michael, followed by a dedicated Q&A session at the end. So please feel free to ask the questions in the questions tab that you should see in your control panel. Okay, so I'll just hand over to Peter just to say a few more words about Michael. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks very much, Emma, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And welcome to this session of our Enterprise Excellence Network webinars. So I'm very pleased this week to welcome Michael Bremer, and Michael is very well known for the work that he's done on there we are, books like How to Do a Gemba Walk. And I was just thinking I hadn't seen Michael in his hat, but his hat has now appeared. So Michael has many years experience of working with lean out there in the States, and specializes in, well, obviously a somewhat people-centered sort of approach, very much looking at the Gemba, doing things in a real way, and doing a lot of work with the AME organization. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Michael, who's going to take us through not this book, but I think the new book, which is in process is probably the right words for it.
That's a good word for it. It's been painfully in process for some time now. But let me switch to the next slide. So thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. And as we were chatting even before we started here, I just believe leadership is so important. It's always been important, but we're kind of at a critical juncture in the world with a number of things that are going on around. And I would guess that most of the people that are listening to this program want to get better, that as a leader, hopefully we all aspire to get better and better at doing that. And if we're going to get better, that usually requires us to make some changes. It's not like the rest of the world is going to accommodate itself to us. But an interesting fact that's there is 80% of leaders think that they're better than average, and I think that must mean that 20% is really a dog. That's so we got to mean that's at that point are more likely that perhaps we've got a somewhat inflated view of how good we are, how effective we are as a leader. And if we were to go out and talk to subordinates of these leaders, this is what we typically would hear. If you look at surveys, and this has been consistent for a decade, from Gallup, from Nielsen, from Wyatt, the 70% of the people in their surveys say that the thing that impacts my engagement the absolute most is the person that I work for. And there was just an article in McKinsey magazine, the consulting firm, just a month ago. And in that, they had a very, very similar percentage where 75% of the people were saying the most stressful part of my workday is the way I interact with my boss. So we've got 80% of the leaders think that they're better than average, but the message that's coming from the subordinates tends to look like this. So perhaps we've met the enemy, and he or she is us. That maybe we are the problem, and maybe we as leaders need to be making more changes than we thought we needed to make in order to get more engagement and more passion from the people that work in our teams and our departments and within our organizations. But one of the things that we really need to overcome, and I was first exposed to this concept in the 1980s when I was creating a productivity improvement effort for Beatrice Foods, which was a Fortune 30 company at the time. Dr. Deming talked a lot about fear. And when he was using it, he was talking how a lot of managers like to use fear in the way they lead. But there's also fear of making these changes. And from a manager perspective, if I if I let go of control, am I going to have chaos? If I let go of control, will the quality of the work that it is that we're doing diminish? If I admit that I, as a leader, need to change, does that mean I'm somehow inadequate? So there's a bunch of fears that on the leadership side that people have. And if we go over to the associate side and we look at what's going on there, the fear changes a little bit, but they're wondering, is it safe for me to point out that there's a problem? Or if I point out some kind of a problem, am I going to be seen as a troublemaker? Am I going to be seen as somebody that's not on the team? A lot of times, I was just talking with my wife, Lynn, this morning about the interesting way that some people operate with leaders that on the outside we might think are dysfunctional country leaders, but people like stability, and so sometimes they'll put up with leadership that perhaps isn't that great simply because their life is stable, and as long as they're not being disrupted, you know, they're kind of okay with it. And so you can have organizations that if I just maintain the status quo, life isn't that bad, it's not that dysfunctional, we'll sort of operate there. And there's a fear of stepping out in doing that. The other thing from an associate perspective is work is like rocks. And a lot of managers, if they've got a work rock, they put those rocks in our sack. And so if you suggest an improvement idea, there's the way your organization operates is they say, oh, well, there's a work rock, here's something to be improved. Okay, Michael, you go fix this. And they don't give me any resources, they don't give me more time, but now I've got this other thing that I now need to do. And of course, when I have my next idea, I'm a little bit reluctant to come forward with that. So there's a lot of that's going on. But so how do we reach our potential? We got this fear that it is that we need to overcome, and it's a challenge. And so I would guess I've been working on this darn new book for a long time. I keep changing components of it, and I think I'm pretty close to the message that I want to bring out now. But I started working in this book 6 years ago. And most of the time when I've done books in the past, I had a pretty clear idea of what I wanted to write and how I wanted to write it. But this subject, it required more finesse. I mean, it would have been easy to do a story that was simple. But I was researching organizations that are highly effective at improving. And I've had an opportunity to visit a number of those companies. There's not a lot in number, but I have been able to see quite a few. And as I talked to leaders in those organizations, they said something very similar to the quote that's here. And they talked about how their leadership style had transformed as a result of the improvement efforts that was going on within their organization. And consistently, they all said, I'm not the same person today that I was 3 years ago, not the same person as 5 or 10 years ago. I've changed, and I continue to change today. And some of these people had been, I think, in an organization that I would describe as very effective, a journey for 15 years or longer, and they're still continuing to evolve and continuing to learn. So when I ran into that, I switched the focus of the research that I was doing, and I wondered, is there some foundation that's here? Is there something that we can stand on? Is there a pattern? Is there a model that we can follow? And so I then began to research what are the common traits between these leaders that allowed them to make these transformative changes. Peter mentioned that I'm involved with the Association of Manufacturing Excellence, and one of the things that we've been doing over the last 10 years is there's frustration because so few organizations are really highly effective at improving. Most of them do an okay job, but they're not elegant. And so one of the things we're doing within AME to see, are there some things we can do to have more people be excellent at improving, and can we help people go through the learning cycle faster? And I'm thinking the same thing with these leadership traits. If we give some thought to these foundations, is there a way that we can progress more rapidly so it doesn't take us 10 years, it doesn't take us 15 years to really get to that stage where they're highly effective? And I believe there is. I believe if we look at some of the things that these leaders have been doing, that there's opportunities for us to practice that. So I'm going to be sharing with you 4 different things that was common across this pool of people that I have the utmost respect for. And even in my own life, when I have been a leader, I know that I've practiced some of these things, and it's been beneficial when I've done it on the way. So the first we'll be talking about is reflection, just slowing down and taking a look at what it is that's going on. The second behavior that we'll look at is a unifying purpose, a clarity of purpose. And one would think that's easy to do, but it's not. It's a challenge. The third is focusing on building relationships. And by that, I'm talking about not focusing so much on yourself, but uplifting the people around you. And then in many ways, the glue that holds these all together and really, I think, adds power and almost turns it into a plan, do, check, adjust, or a kata type learning loop for those of you that might be doing Mike Rother's kata methodology, is visual leadership. The visuals in many ways are the glue that can link those other three things and allow us to continue to evolve those. So let's get into them and talk about them. So the first is reflection. And it sounds simple enough, but what these folks did is they found ways on an ongoing basis to challenge their beliefs about the way their organization operated, to challenge assumptions that they had made, and I think in many ways to challenge their own personal biases. They're open and they're receptive to coming in and making changes to that. And there's many ways that we can use reflection. And I'm certain probably most of you have done one or all of these things that I'm going to share. The first is process map. A process map is a total exercise in reflection. We create this picture. You don't have to have any knowledge of what this process is. Just from the little bit of wires and linkages that are there, you can see this is an ugly process, and it was. When you get this, and not only myself as the leader, but my team and maybe even people within my organization, we can reflect on what it is that we see there. We can begin to look at it differently and say, oh my, I knew we had some ugly problems, but I didn't realize they were this ugly. And we can use that then to create a future state. We can use that for determining what are the most important things for us to be going after within this map to make some changes that are there. It's a powerful tool. I may even see using this, what are some things I need to be doing as a leader to lead in a different way to allow us, when we come up with that future state map, to be able to operate that way. Another way to reflect, and a number of these leaders that I spoke to did this, and it was, I thought this is pretty interesting, is they looked at some of the behaviors that they were most comfortable doing, and they wrote them down. And then they'd ask themselves a question: is this really the ideal behavior for me to be practicing in a particular situation? There was some research that was done in the 50s by two professors, Elias Porter and Sarah Maloney, and it was called Strength Deployment Inventory. And in their research, I thought this was fascinating. We used to use this assessment tool that they had when I was running the consulting company for many, many years. And in it, what they talked about is a weakness is very often a strength that's been carried to excess. So if you think about a strength as I'm decisive, or a strength is I'm really good with analyzing a situation, or I'm really good being supportive and helping my team members to get better at what it is they're trying to do. I'm a very supportive leader. If I take any of those and I do too much of it, if I'm very decisive, that can become overbearing. It can mean that I don't listen to what it is that my team members are trying to do. It could mean I even become a bully if I'm doing too much of that and being too decisive. If I'm too analytical, that can start to look like analysis paralysis. I know when I was younger, I had a number of bosses that I felt were totally guilty of analysis paralysis, although perhaps I didn't do the thorough job that I should have been doing at the time for some of the things I was involved with. But so much of us, we talk about people-centric leadership and the idea of being supportive, but you can actually be too supportive. When I used to run workshops for the military, I'd worked with a number of groups within the U.S. Air Force and in the U.S. Navy. And when they would try to draw a picture of what being too supportive would look like, very often they draw a picture of somebody kicking the dog. And the problem with being too supportive is, do you ever really bring what it is that you feel needs to be done to the table? Or are you always supporting others and never bringing your perspective that's there? So we can take any of these behaviors, and if that's the only way that we operate and we do too much of it, it can become a weakness. And when I first read about that research they were doing, I thought it was pretty fascinating. the next thing that we can simply do is ask for feedback or get feedback as people give us feedback and use it. And let me share a story from early in my career. When I first became a manager, I had a group of about 10 people. Pretty excited. I wanted to do well. And I had a guy that was working for me. I had a group the group was about equally split between men and women that I had at the time. One of the guys was named Ralph Johnson. And Ralph came into my office one day and said, whenever I have a problem and I come in and I talk to you about the problem, it just seems to go away. And so when Ralph first shared this feedback with me, I didn't really say anything there at the time, but when he left the office, I smiled and I patted myself on the back and I said, Michael, you're a great leader. You're making all these problems go away for the people that are on your staff. And I had worked for Beatrice for probably about 10 years at that point and had a pretty good network of folks within the organization. And so I was feeling pretty good. And then I thought about what Ralph was telling me. I reflected. And I realized Ralph really wasn't telling me that I was doing a great job. What Ralph was really telling me was that I'm solving all of his problems for him, and I'm not letting him have the learning experience to go through and to figure out how to do these things on his own. And when I came back the next day and had this conversation, he pretty much admitted that he wanted to be able to fix these problems himself. And so I made a change in the way that I led at that point in time. I no longer automatically would run to do an intervention for any of the people that were on my team. The change that I made at that point was, if they were running into problems, the very first question that I would ask them is, do you want me to do something about this? Are you comfortable, proceeding on this, and you don't need my help? And I would get permission from them, and I would get a focus from them if they wanted me to do an intervention and to do something. And it just made it much easier. And the other thing that was really neat is it was amazing how the staff blossomed, went and took on responsibility, and the outstanding job they did of solving the problems they were running into, often very differently, maybe almost all the time, but very often differently than I would have solved it. And so it was a neat learning experience for me early in my career. And then there's another tool that you've probably used. I see a lot of people use this tool with project teams. I have rarely seen this tool used with how I am as a leader, or if I'm a department manager, how our department operates. And that's a keep, stop, start. And so it's another way of asking for feedback. So I could be asking this of my team members. I could even be asking this to some of my peers. And let's just say I'm focused on the way Michael leads. So what do you think I should keep doing as a leader? What am I doing that helps us to accomplish our goals and our objectives, helps you to be able to get your work done in an effective way? Is there anything I should stop doing as a leader? Anything that is inhibiting what it is that we're trying to accomplish? And is there anything that I should start doing that I'm not currently doing now? This tool, I've seen many project teams use this tool. I can take that tool and I can use it in other settings. And it's a great way to reflect, get feedback. I'm actively seeking out that feedback and use that for making changes. Those of you who know me also know that I'm big on doing Gemba walks. And I'm big on doing observations. I'm not trying to peddle the book here. I'm sure you'll get copies of these slides. And there's a link there that you can go for a free set of slides that follow the book that talk about the things that I think are important relative to doing Gemba walks. But what I am big on is observation. And the challenge with observations is most people don't do a good job of it when they start observing. There's a tendency for us to think, well, I just kind of stroll out there and I look and I see what it is that's going on, and I learn something and I come back and we're all better for it. It doesn't work that way. Most of the time, I've had an opportunity to coach a lot of people doing this over the years. And so often we go out there, and when we go out there, we see things that reinforce our beliefs. I look for stuff that reinforces what it is that I want to believe. I look for stuff that reinforces the assumptions that it is that I've made about how my team, how my organization operates. If I really want to do a good job of observing, I've got to slow down the noise that's in my head. I've got to pay attention to what it is that's happening, and I need to do a heck of a lot of listening. I can ask a couple of questions to get it started, but I've got to listen to the people. And I I think there's a rhythm to the way that a process operates. So when I'm in an organization doing an assessment for a company that's applying for our AME's Excellence Award, I look for the rhythm of the process, the rhythm, what's the harmony or lack of harmony look like in an organization with the way people are operating. And you can train your eyes to be able to see that. And it's extremely powerful because it's a neat way for us to realize it. Oh, without even doing the process map, I can see, oh my goodness, our policies, our procedures, our protocols are inhibiting people's ability to be able to get their work done. Or I can see where there's difficulties or where we're doing things over again. Just there's a phenomenal amount of learning. And then me as a leader, what do I need to be doing differently to allow us to more quickly and more effectively address those issues that are confronting us? But so much of this, if you get really good at observing, I think it makes it much easier for one to become a more effective leader. I really like to take an opportunity to look at that through what I call young eyes, going in there and trying to do this. Young people have such enthusiasm, and there's this eagerness for learning. And so if I can stop thinking I know, and I can start thinking that I want to learn, I want to understand, and I do that from the perspective of younger eyes, which for me is getting to be a bigger distance between the age I am now and what I was then. But it's great, it's exciting, and I think that learning that I still do whenever I go out is one of the things that, even though I'm now retired, I no longer consult, but doing a presentation like this or doing my volunteer activities with AME, I'm still learning, and I love the positive energy that I gain from doing that. The next behavior that's there is a unifying purpose, and one would think that that's an easy thing to do, but it's not. An experience I had early on learning about purpose was when I was given, one of the things I did at Beatrice is I was given responsibility for creating a company-wide productivity improvement effort. This is all the way back in 1980, which is probably before some of you were born. And one of the things I did to get some data points, some understanding, is I was visiting. Beatrice owned 440 businesses spread all over the globe. We owned things like Samsonite Luggage, Tropicana Orange Juice, Calgary and Bowser in the UK. There were a bunch of companies that were part of the portfolio. And so as I was doing that, I was just trying to learn, what did the companies do, how they operate, what were they doing in terms of improving productivity. And I was at a food plant in Ohio, the state of Ohio in the US, and there was a general manager there named JJ McRoby. And as we were walking through the plant that day, that was toward the end of the day shift, sanitation crew was coming in, and one of the people on the day shift did something that was pretty disrespectful to the sanitation crew that was coming in. JJ went over, had a one-on-one conversation with this person. I didn't listen into what was going on and came back. And then I was back in the plant the next day. And what impressed me about purpose and clarity of it was JJ called an all hands meeting. And in that, he talked about there should be no job that we're doing in this food plant that isn't important and isn't critical to our success. Everything we are doing, every job that you are doing is important to our success. And he went on to explain that how when the sanitation crew comes in after the day crew has been doing most of the food production, that if the sanitation crew didn't do a good job of sanitizing the facility, there was a danger of salmonella. There was a danger that even the people processing the food during the day shift, there could be a safety issue. It was critical for that crew to come in and to do a good job. And it was critical to the job that crew did for the success of the organization. I was really impressed with how he brought that home. He didn't talk about it as clarity of purpose, but it's clearly focused on what it is we need to be doing together to work together to make it happen. And so it was one of my first learnings of getting an understanding of maybe some of the emotional stuff that's going on in doing this, but how it is that we needed to go about it. When we talk about purpose, and we're going and you're talking to your people, and this has been my experience from traveling around the world. If you ask about personal purpose, what people typically want is they first of all want to be treated with a degree of respect. Now, when they're not, sometimes they know that's the reality and they feel they don't have any choices and they'll put up with it, but they ain't happy about it. They don't like it. Most people, anywhere I've been, wish to be treated with a degree of respect. The next thing most of us, I would guess everybody that's listening to this talk, is you want to have some type of an impact. I want to have an impact on my organization. If I'm a parent, I want to have an impact on my family. I want to have an impact on the ability of my children to be successful in the world. And I want to live a meaningful life. Those things tend to be universal. The thing that was so outstanding about these leaders that I'm talking about in these organizations that were highly effective at improving relative to purpose was they linked that personal purpose that people really want to have to live this life with meaning. And they link that to what the business is trying to accomplish. And I want to share a personal story here with this of a kind of one of the learnings that I went through again while I was working for Beatrice. But it fits with so many of the things that the stories that I saw from these leaders. But I want to share with you one of my stories rather than one of theirs. I had been the productivity boy for 4 years, creating a company-wide improvement effort for Beatrice in the 80s. And I'm kind of embarrassed what that thing looked like based on what it is that I know today. But in the early 1980s, we had a pretty decent effort, and the organizations that were participating were indeed improving their productivity, doing a better job of improving. And so at Beatrice, they realized that I had, in a former life, I had a background in information technology. And we had an information technology department that was having some problems. There were about 100 people. And so they made me the director of information systems. And when I took over responsibility for this department, we could guarantee with 100% reliability that we would not give you what you asked for, and we would give it to you late. This department was outstanding at doing that. There were always stories as to why it didn't work, why it was late, and they usually blame the customer, the internal customer, for that. It's because you keep making changes, so the thing is late. I mean, tons of stories, tons of excuses. And so when I took responsibility for that, it gave me an opportunity to practice a lot of the work that I had been doing the prior 4 years of sort of being an internal consultant to the companies in Beatrice on productivity improvement. And we clearly, I don't think I used these words at the time, but we needed to change the culture of the way it was that we were operating. And I talked about control and my liking to have control as a manager. One of the things that scared the bejesus out of me when I took over this role was that technology had radically changed from the technology that I knew probably 10 years earlier. And I was a technology idiot on what we were doing, the software we were using for doing the work, and even to some degree, the way these systems were interacting with one another. So as a leader, it was the first time in my life I could not possibly be in control of what was going on, and I totally needed to trust the people that were working for me. And so there were some stories that are there with that. But getting back to what is going on, we needed to change the culture. And so one of the first things that I did, and this is before the days of Agile, one of my new policies after I had been in the department for about 40 days was we would never ever do a project again that was scheduled to run longer than 12 months to develop it. Prior to that, they were doing these 3-year projects. You get to the end of 3 years and the people had changed and the needs had changed and it was just chaos. And so we didn't do anything that was longer than 12 months. And we needed to get closer to our customers, that everything that we were doing, I wanted a little more concrete reason why we were doing it. I'll come back to that. So there were 2 incidents that happened in there that ended up really helping to develop that culture. And so as a leader, if you go through a reflection period, you take some of these actions relative to clarifying the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing, and you can get a lot of leverage out of that. And so the first incident that happened is I had the manager that was in charge of our database and the manager, a woman that was in charge of systems administration, come into my office. And the 2 of them are arguing about some technical thing. I have no clue what they're talking about. And they're sort of bickering in my office. And so I looked at him and I said, I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. But if you want me to make a decision, I'll make a decision. And their eyes, I can remember this now, their eyes got big. They looked at me, their jaws open. And the woman, whose name was Cindy looked at me and said, no, that's okay. We'll resolve it. Well, that incident went through the department like wildfire. There's about 100 people in this group. Everybody knew what had happened here by the end of the day. But the thing that did is the person that was running this department prior to me was sort of a control-oriented person. And they realized, I'm not going to take control. I'm pushing the decision-making down. I want them making the decisions. And that actually ended up being one of the foundations of changing the culture of that group. The second incident happened when I had one of the managers come in, and he was working on this, putting the requirements together for this big new system. And I said, well, what problem is the customer trying to solve with what it is they're asking you to do? Because what we were used to doing was just going out to the customer and having the customer give you, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that. It's kind of a wish list. And I said, don't tell me about a new project that it is that we're going to be doing unless you can tell me what problem it is that we are going to be solving with this work that it is that we're doing. And I want to know specifically, I want to know, why is this an issue for them? What are the barriers they're running into with operating the way they're operating that day? And I wish I knew about A3s then, because I really could have used an A3 as we were trying to do this work. But we had a little project problem-solving sheet where they would have to go through and define it. And what ended up happening with my team leaders, my project leaders, is they changed. They no longer went and just picked up a list of requirements. What they started to do as part of defining the problem was they would go and they would observe what it was the customer was doing. The problem that it is they were running into with what they were trying to accomplish. And then they came back and they had a better idea of what it was that was going on. And we ended up with a much better relationship between our internal customers and the people that were doing the development. So that after I had led that group for 2 years, we had done a total turnaround, and we moved from our customers absolutely hating us and wanting to know why they needed to work with an inside group, they'd rather work with somebody outside, to our customers loving us. We delivered every project on time, and we delivered I can't say we delivered them flawlessly, but the quality of the deliverables had quadrupled. There were very, very few problems, and the problems that did come up after that two-year period, we were able to resolve. So going through there and getting your people to I wanted meaning in the work, and I didn't really use this language then because I didn't know this language. But what I wanted was I wanted the development of my staff, where their esteem is developing, their capability is developing, and I wanted us to be working more closely with our customers to do these 3 things that are shown here in this list. The leaders in these highly effective organizations do this automatically. They're always thinking about, what am I doing for development, which brings us into the next slide. We're going to talk about it, personal relationships, linking it to, why are we doing this? What is it that's important that's going on? And there's just a tremendous amount of power and leverage here about, I believe, getting the right thing done at the right time. The next is building relationships. And I don't know what you've heard, but in my experience I'm old. I've been doing this for 40 years. And consistently over these 40 years, organizational leaders say people are our most important thing. But in fact, most of the time, people don't get a whole lot of respect. They really don't get a lot of self-management in most organizations. And when you look at the way they operate, we say these words, but we really don't live those words. And I had yet another incident here that radically transformed the way that I consulted. So at this point in time, I was the president of the Cumberland Group. We're a small consulting firm in Chicago. And I was really early in my learning stages about the Toyota methodology. So this is in the probably mid-1990s. And I'm at a manufacturing plant in Shreveport, Louisiana, teaching them how to do Kaizen teams. And so we'd done a team. We'd made some changes to align with about 25 folks. We presented to management. Everybody thought it was really great. And we're back in the room. And I'm going to be heading back to Chicago in an hour or two. And I thought, well, I looked at the team and said, well, you invested a week of your life doing this project. What did you get out of it? And so we go around the room and everybody says very, very nice stuff. And then we come to Pearlie. And Pearlie said, I've worked for this company for 25 years. And she paused. It's the first time they ever asked me to think. And I really liked it. And when Pearlie said that, I've got an IT finance background, kind of a logical sort of guy. I think a reasonable intellectual understanding, and I think I probably had that 80% where I thought I was doing a good job of leading most of the time, when I was in the corporate world. I had a good intellectual understanding always of the importance of engaging my people, and I always did try to do that. It was pretty decent at. I was very good at giving credit to the people that did the work, never trying to shine the spotlight on me. But when Pearlie said this, it was the very first time I ever realized the emotional impact of not engaging our people. This is an organization of roughly 350 people, and they were not tapping into the emotional side of the people that were in their business. I've got 300 other Pearlies that are there in this organization, and we are not utilizing the capability that's there. And what that did for me is it changed the way that I talk to leaders for the rest of my life. That when we talk about people not being engaged in that earlier slide, 75% saying it's my direct boss. Well, I'm trying to do a decent job, but am I really going to go all out? I'm not. And when a leader can tap into this, and you can do this as a team leader, I don't care what your boss is doing. You've got a responsibility for the people that you work with, that they deserve this from you, to allow them to emotionally grow and to contribute in an effective way. I had heard this next quote attributable to Steve Jobs. I don't know if he really said it or not, but it's still a powerful quote. And he talked about relationships are the treasure, and it's 70% of the work we do. People, they're willing to do it. I mean, they see it as part of the job. But these best leaders, these leaders in these organizations that I was referencing that are highly effective at improving, they tapped into this 30%. And they did that through the things that it is we're talking about, practicing personal reflection, of looking at the way that they were leading and seeing what I need to do. What is it that I can change as a leader that's going to allow us to be more effective? They really shifted that focus of, they were all so good consistently, of uplifting the people that are around them, not just on their team, uplifting their peers, uplifting their organization as they were doing these things. And when I can do this in an emotional way, that I'm positively tapping into the emotions of the people that are there, there's a phenomenal amount of power. The glue that holds all of this stuff together then, so we talked about clarity of purpose, we talked about reflection, and we talked about relationships, is visual leadership. And the visuals, where I can use these visuals to make it easy to see the problems that are going on, I'm actually using these visuals for making decisions. They could be very, very, it blows me away with how much it is they can do if I get these visuals to be good. And I'm going to share 2 examples with you in just a moment. So visual management, which is what people often do, it focuses on the results that it is that we're doing right now, the kind of activity counts. Did we do enough? A little bit of did we do it on time? There's typically a quality thing that's there. But when I see these visual boards, that I can see that it's influencing the way that it is we're behaving, like with problem solving. If I can really see there's development of the people in terms of developing their problem solving skills, and we're doing a better job of improving, if I'm in doing an assessment, I know that this board has some power and some zest to it, as opposed to we took it off the computer and we just threw it up here, and we kind of use it so we can pretend like we're doing this lean stuff. The other thing that these visuals do is they can really drive collaboration across departments. So let me share just 2 super simple ones. This visual came from a company, they're global, but I saw this one at one of the facilities in the US. This data on it, the data that's on this visual, I made up. This is not their data. It comes from a company called Autoleave. They manufacture the airbags that do not explode in the unintended way. And so they picked up quite a bit of business the last couple of years from Takata, which had problems with their airbags in automobiles. And this visual was just beautiful. One of the things they were working on at Autoleave was ergonomic stress, in the potential for ergonomic stress. And so they go through and they do periodic assessments. Well, what this visual was, it was a sheet off of a flip chart pad. It was pasted horizontally like this, and they had a drawing of all of the cells on their floor. And all that they showed on this was the where we had seen some ergonomic stress last year and where we were seeing some ergonomic stress as we were doing things this year. And the power of this visual is it was right on the door, next to the door where people went to go into the factory. And so when they would go into the factory, they would see this visual that's right there. And when they would go out, even if they weren't doing this, it raised their consciousness so that as I'm walking around, and one of the things that was on there, it was one of their key strategies for reducing ergonomic stress. It was an important business objective. I'd be aware, I'm increasing my awareness, which is what these visuals should be doing. The visual, there should be some power in this. So I could do this for, they were using it for ergonomic stress. If we've got a lot of turnover in our facility, I could show what was a turnover in these cells versus turnover this year. I could use something like this for if we're working on cross training. How many people are, what's the percentage of people that are cross trained for whatever it is our targets are? I just love the simplicity of this because I could see it, I could grasp it, I can go out and I can use it. This next one, if you've heard me speak before, you might have heard this story, but it's so powerful, I continue to use it. This was a company that was in Chicago. They had been on the lean journey for, probably 10 years. They were doing a decent job. I wouldn't say what they were doing was elegant, but they were doing some very, very good things. And part of the problem in the administrative world is it's very difficult to know what our capacity for doing work looks like, because in the administrative world, our capacity is usually invisible. And it doesn't matter if I'm in accounting, if I'm in information systems, if I'm a design engineer, which is where this board comes from. And the problem when your capacity is invisible is then it looks like you got infinite capacity. So people can just keep putting more work into the bucket because you'll get to it when you can get to it. And in the administrative world, we're so used to, I'm working in this thing over here, and then I can't because I don't have the information, or I'm waiting for a decision, or waiting forever, and I've got 6 other things it is that I can work on. So I just naturally go over here and I shift and I work in those things. And it's not even seen as a problem. It's seen as, well, that's how life is, when you do this sort of work. So this chart came from a young engineer named Jordan. And all Jordan initially wanted to know is what is our capacity for doing work in the design engineering group. And the reason that was important is because this organization, 70% of their sales were from custom design product. They had a manufacturing product, they were manufacturing fractional horsepower motors. So if you look at a popcorn machine or ice maker, in all likelihood, they've got a little engine in there that's driving that piece of equipment to work. And so he wondered, and so keeping this simple, let's say that Jordan did his analysis and he had 5 engineers and they decided that these 5 engineers at any given point in time could work on 5 requests for proposals. Share that information with operations, with purchasing, with sales. Ultimately, everybody said, yeah, that's a reasonable number. We can do 25 projects, 25. So the power of this board then came in, that when sales came in and they got requests for proposal number 26, and they say, well, hey, we got this really hot proposal that we'd like for the design engineers to work on. Can you work on it? And Jordan would say, absolutely. Just tell me which of the 25 you want us to take out. And so what these boards really should be doing, and the best boards that I've seen over the years, is the best boards drive collaboration and better communications between departments. I'm not using this board just for our activity, but I'm using this board to influence the people that it is that we need to play with. And so what happened here with those sales they got this opportunity number 26 they really would like for us to work on. And let's say it's even a good one. So what sales started to do with no Kaizen team, nobody telling sales to do anything, but coming in, they looked at this board twice a week for a 15-minute meeting. With sales coming in and seeing this, they were only winning 33% of their proposals. Intellectually, everybody knew that, but now I'm confronted with a visual that I got a picture. It's like a process map, only this is a picture of the proposals that we're working on. And I can see that 2/3 of the time, we don't get the proposal. But originally, when I was in sales, if I had an opportunity to win a sale, I'm game, I want to throw it in there. Well, what sales started doing when they're having these weekly conversations is they did a better job of policing the proposals that were coming in. And so a lot of times, if you do a few more questions, you can find somebody just wants a competitive bid. Sales started to filter that out with nobody telling them to do a better job on their own because they wanted to They wanted to increase their win rate. And over a 12-month period, they ended up increasing their win rate on requests for proposals from 33% to over 60%. Your visuals, if your visuals are not doing this in your organization, your visuals aren't good visuals. And so you as a leader have got to figure out, along with your team and in conversations with the people that you work with, how can we do this so that it's helping our organization? Processes, there's more intellectual awareness of process performance today, but hardly anybody manages that way. These things can get at helping us as a leader do a better job with our processes without attacking anybody, because it's simply factual information that we've agreed it is appropriate. So I love using the visuals because it can just come in and help us to take these old habits that we've got and begin to develop the new habits that can help me be a better leader and can help our organization operate in a much more effective way. So kind of moving to the close here, how do we get there? So it's funny because a lot of us, or maybe it was just me, but I thought when I became a leader, they'll send you to a training class or two, and some of those things are kind of a total waste of time. Some of them are kind of okay. I just figured, I watched other people lead. I should be able to do it. But when you think about professional athletes, what does a professional athlete do to get good? They practice their skills. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell, for thousands of hours to really become world class at what it is they do. And to us, it looks like it's easy because we see them when they've arrived. We don't see all the work that went into doing this. And we can even see with these two athletes that the techniques they're learning, they apparently had two different coaches that were doing this. And one said, I think this style is good. The other one said, I think that style is a little better for the way that it is you should be moving your body as you approach the finish line. But both of these individuals have practiced hard to be able to be as effective as they are. So if our profession is leadership, if we are responsible, my job is to be a leader, then I should be practicing being a leader on an ongoing basis. I should always be practicing to get better at leading because that's my job. So what I suggest, if you like these behaviors that I'm talking about and you think it's a good idea to try to practice those, is what are two actions you can do to practice reflecting? What are two actions that you can take to help your organization really understand, to get clarity of purpose that we can buy into and relate that to the individual need of having a meaning in their life? Then what can you do to validate your experiment? Because the changes you want to make, it's an experiment. So how are you going to validate that? What can you do to not just you think you're doing better, but I can get some feedback or data that suggests that indeed we are doing better? And then what are the next two that it is that I want to go after? Because it takes time to get there. And so I believe in many ways this is one of the most important things that we're responsible for as a leader, is becoming better, improving our skills so that ultimately we become world class in what it is that we're doing. So we talked about four, I think, levers that are very, very powerful. And if you consistently practice those, and these leaders in these highly effective companies did, the message that came back, as I looked at their stories that they shared, things that it was they were doing, were very, very powerful. And it allowed them, it allowed their team, and it allowed their organization to progress. And I believe in many ways, these are foundational elements for allowing us to get better at what it is we do. And I want to close with a quote, two quotes actually, from C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, we used to read the Chronicles of Narnia several times to our kids, and I now get to read them to my grandchildren. And he's one of my favorite authors. I love his messages. And one of the things he talked about was humility. And the way he described it, it's not thinking less of myself, it's thinking of myself less often. And all of these leaders, with the exception of one, I'd say had a high degree of humility. And the other thing that Lewis said was, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you're at, and we've got an opportunity to change the ending. And my challenge to everybody that's listening to this, and if you want to send me an email and ask me a question, I promise I'll respond to it. I'm retired. I don't have nearly as much free time as I thought I would, but I would be happy to interact with you because it's so important for us to be making these changes. So with that, be happy to take any questions. Let me stop sharing here.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you very much, Michael. I think a real education there on your 4 key points. So what we're going to do now is we've got a few minutes to take any questions. So if you'd like to fill in your questions in the question box, then when they come through, I can read those out for Michael to give you some answers. So
How many people? How many people are here, Peter?
We got 36 attendees at the moment. So maybe I could start the ball rolling while we're waiting for people to come on. So at the beginning of your talk, you were talking about this area of fear and so forth, and there seems to be quite a movement in psychological safety, which I guess is bound up with this whole fear area. So have you done much thinking on this sort of psychological safeties? How would you create that?
Well, there's that. There's a lot of EQ talk with the emotional quotient that gets talked about. I think that also comes in and relates to that. The you know, people talk about heroes today, and heroes kind of a funny thing, but I think one of the things that these leaders exhibited was a degree of courage. And it's not, and when I talk about leaders, I mean, we got the person that's got a team that may, she may have this group of people that are reporting to her, but we're all responsible for leading ourselves. So the leadership goes an associate is a leader. I mean, you're responsible for the way you lead yourself and what it is that you do. And so part of dealing with the fear is just having the courage to, I like for me, I mean, it's the write down what the fear is. A lot of times just writing it down and saying, what is it that I'm afraid of? And then ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? You don't want to go through and address these things with a blunt instrument, but what's then a way, if I've got a fear, what's a way that I can begin to progress toward dealing with that? So let's say I'm afraid to suggest an improvement idea to my leader. And so a way to softly begin to approach that are, rather than my coming right out and saying, I think we need to be doing this better, if they don't have a protocol for making it easy for me to do that, is I can go ask my leader, are there things we need to be doing to improve the way we operate? Just ask a soft question that's around where it is that we're trying to go to allow me to step in that direction of trying to do it. And then I of course love some of the feedback mechanisms we were talking about too, of what can I do to get better? How can I do that? And if there's a fear thing, like one of the things I do in Gimbal walks, a lot of people there's a fear of going out into the organization and doing that. And so one of the ways that I've suggested for some of those leaders to overcome that is have a partner that goes with you. So do it as a duo. They're going out, and so I've got 2 people that are going out and doing it, and there's comfort in that. And if I freeze, I've got this person here that can step in and ask a question or do a clarification, or whatever to help us along. As I get more comfortable with it, then I've got an ability to grow.
Great. Okay, so we got a couple of things coming in. So the first one is from Davey, who says, not a question, but thank you very much for the great presentation, Michael. So that was that one.
Good pat in the back.
Okay, and one from Stephen here says, what would be your approach if you interact with leaders who talk the talk but don't walk the walk?
Excuse me. I'd say that's the norm, number one. So if you're in a situation like that, you are absolutely not alone. I think one of the things I would do, and one of the things I've seen work is, and that's where the visuals come in. So let's say that we've got a leadership team, and you've approached them at times in the past, and you don't want to be ugly about it. You don't want to say you guys aren't supporting what it is that you're not walking the talk. And so what are some things that I've done that in approaching it differently? Now that I'm thinking about this, there's yet another personal story I could share of a Michael learning experience. But I think the visuals are a good way to do that. So what is it that you feel your organization needs to be doing better? Your department, not the organization, but you within. What is it? And what are some of the things that are inhibiting your team's ability to be able to get that done? And is there a picture it is that we can make of that? In the story that I shared with Jordan Jordan knew there were problems with design engineering, and everybody knew that we were only winning a third of the proposals. but because that was the norm, we all just kind of accepted, well, we only win a third of the proposals because that's how life is. So Jordan's first goal was simply for the engineering department to get people to agree to how much work are we capable of doing. And so often just giving people a picture of reality as it exists in a non-threatening way. And as Jordan developed his thing, the example I used was 5 engineers and 5 projects, he tested that. We went to production and sales were the 2 big ones he needed to work with. There was an interface with purchasing for sure, but production that needed to test the designs, sales that was bringing in quotes, those were the 2 key players. And so as he came up with his capacity, he was talking to them. He was inviting it in. He didn't start out at 5 and 5. I don't know what he might have started out at 3 and 3, or rather 3 and 5. But ultimately, they all agreed to a number. I've seen that again and again, where a department can simply begin to post. This stuff's all in a computer report somewhere, but nobody looks at it. It's not, the power isn't publicly displaying it. So if I were in a situation where the leadership team wasn't embracing this, I would try in a safe way, without attacking a person, without attacking another department, just to factually display some of what it is that's going on. Another quick way is you bring them to a Shingo meeting, or you bring them to an AE meeting, go to visit another organization, and then have a dialogue about what it is they saw. Or you could even begin to network them, with other people that once you've done that, they could network people that are in organizations and maybe get it going at that way too, but that's kind of indirect. The visuals is an underutilized tool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So there's another question here, and it's another Stephen, but I'm just going to sort of prelude it first of all. So thinking about you talked about the second area being the unifying purpose, and obviously there can be purpose for the group company, the site, the team, the individual, it can purpose at different levels. And in my own thinking, I've sort of come to the conclusion that from the individual's point of view, it's about meaning. So for them, the meaning of why am I here? What am I trying to achieve? What do I want to get to in my career? And how does that link with the purpose of the organization? Then you can hit the sort of sweet spot, which is a bit like the ikigai sort of Japanese sort of stuff that you can
Right.
do that. But anyway, Stephen's question, hold on, it was, hold on, it's just moving around here. Oops. Yeah, so Stephen says, how do you get senior leadership to validate that they have a unifying purpose? Make it explicit using visualization, or how would you do that?
Well, the visualization is, again, I think I like that as a tool. Another way is it's going back and asking the why. So most organizations have these, there's these nice words, and we love our people and we love our customers, and then we do what it is that we do, and one would ever know that we love those constituencies. Sometimes just asking people where you have an opportunity to have a conversation, why is this important? Why is that important? And get to something that moves from the abstract to a little bit more concrete. And then the question is there a way that we can measure our progress against that why? So and it might be a visual, it might be some public visual, or maybe it's a metric that we're going to start doing. But if I can get them to articulate a more concrete why coming out of that abstract world, and get down to something that indeed becomes measurable and indeed can become a target that we're working toward, it's a learning experience. If you've got the unenlightened leadership team, that doesn't mean they're bad people. It means they're unenlightened. And in my experience, another kind of learning experience for me is what my partner Brian used to love to use this expression: reasonable people, equally well informed, seldom disagree. The problem is we're not equally well informed. And so again, we go back to the headset. So I can take the headset that these are all, the mindset rather, that these are all concrete heads. Or do I want to take the mindset that these people are simply unenlightened, that either they're not informed or I'm not informed? So possibly I'm the person that doesn't understand. And so what can we do to get us to be more equally well informed? And a lot of times you can get agreement on what it is that needs to happen. But like with the reason I keep using that one example of Jordan's over and over again is everybody knew they were only winning proposals a third of the time. But they're not really confronted with it in a non-threatening way. And so finding ways to increase our enlightenment, which to me, it's a lot of what lean is. A lot of lean is simply, I love the expression learning to see. Because if you don't see it, you're not going to do anything about it. And so many of the lean tools are aids with helping us, learn to see if I start to look at them in a more holistic way, rather than just fixing the individual, problem of the moment.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So we're pretty much out of time, but I've just got one last one from Gilomo here. So let's put this one to you. So comments about when you try to change culture, but the old ways they're very well ingrained because it was reinforced by failures using lean. What can you suggest if that's the case?
Well, I am not a lean purist. You could not name a 3-letter improvement program that I've not done over the last 40 years. In the 1980s, I started with something called total quality management, and then of course Six Sigma, sort of wandered in there with, and then Six Sigma incorporated, 2/3 of the lean tools, and 2/3 of the tools that we use for our improvement are from traditional industrial engineering. They're used in very, very different ways. So I wouldn't worry about calling it lean. I would try to get rid of the label. And if the lean things failed, that's fine. But what is it that we need to be doing to improve, to make the organization, to make the team more successful moving forward in the future? And just again, focus on what is it that we feel that's important? Where are changes that need to be made to accomplish that? And I'm not going to defend lean. I mean, lean has failed. People like to say 70% of these things have failed. That's not my experience. My experience is 70% of the time we didn't meet our expectations, but typically these are powerful tools. You use the tools, you usually get better, but you rarely transform. And so getting it to, again, to be more concrete, don't worry about what we call it, what's the challenge, and then how can I take these tools that are really good? How can we do it more holistically, where we're really helping the people to grow and proceed forward? And I don't call it whatever you want. I'm kind of amazed that the term lean has had the durability that it's have. I kept thinking it's finally going to die and something new would come along, but so far it hasn't.
Great. Okay. Good. Well, thank you very much for that, Michael. I think it's been a very interesting, informative, lots of stories and anecdotes there. So we've reached the end of our time. So, well, thank you very much. And we'll give you a virtual round of applause. And just handing over to Emma to close things down for us.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you very much, Michael. And thank you, everyone, for attending. In the follow-up email, you'll receive an e-certificate to say that you've attended a webinar by Michael, as well as the webinar recording as well. And keep an eye open for our upcoming webinars on our website. Thank you very much. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. And Emma, I'll send you the slide deck. I don't know if you got the final version of it, so I'll send you the deck. And as I said in there, if anybody wants to use the stuff that's in there, it's fine. If it looks like it had some intellectual capital, I just like somebody say it came from there. So
yeah, great. So if anyone wants the slide deck, if you email myself, I can then send it directly on to you. So you'll have my email in the follow-up email that's sent after this as well.
All right, everybody, take care.
Right.
Thank
okay.
you.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Bye now.
Thanks, Peter. That was hopefully that was good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was very nice. So yeah, so we should try and have a chat with Chris as well.
Yeah, we should, because I think philosophically we're all in a pretty similar spot.
Okay, good. Well, let's do that on email. Okay.
Okay.
Bye now.
Care.
Bye. Bye. Bye.